That's impossible! They had mocked her with those words, their laughter cutting deeper than any knife ever could. But in that defining moment, as the target exploded miles away, their mockery transformed into stunned silence. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The morning air hung crisp and thin over the Carpathian demonstration grounds. Military officials, defense contractors, and technology investors huddled in their expensive coats, breath-forming clouds as they awaited the next presentation of cutting-edge weaponry. When Eleanor "Ellie" Varga stepped onto the firing platform, the murmurs began immediately. "Is this some kind of joke?" Someone whispered loudly enough for all to hear. Ellie stood motionless, her silver hair catching the morning light, her oversized utility coat hanging loosely on her slender frame. At 67, she looked nothing like the sleek weapons specialists who had preceded her with their tactical gear and computerized targeting systems. The retired ballistics physicist moved with deliberate calm, ignoring the snickers that rippled through the audience. "Miss Varga has requested a demonstration slot," announced the program director, his tone betraying skepticism. "She claims to have a traditional approach." More laughter followed as Ellie opened an ancient leather case and withdrew her vintage bolt-action rifle. The weapon looked like a museum piece compared to the modular firearms displayed earlier. A defense minister from Germany didn't bother hiding his amusement, nudging his colleague as Ellie methodically checked the chamber. "The target is the unmanned drone bunker at Sector 7, the director explained, pointing to a barely visible structure on a distant ridge. "That's 3.8 miles from this position." Ellie nodded once, her weathered hands steady as she loaded a single round. The crowd's derision grew when she produced no targeting computer, no wind calculator, just a small notebook with handwritten figures she consulted briefly before tucking it away. She took position, adjusting her stance with practiced precision. The retired sniper inhaled deeply, her finger curling around the trigger with the muscle memory of thousands of previous shots. The rifle cracked, the sound sharp against the mountain backdrop. Nothing happened. Laughter erupted across the viewing area. Military officials began turning away. Consultants checked their watches, and someone called for the next presenter. Then 10 seconds later, a distant flash bloomed on the faraway ridge. The drone bunker erupted in a controlled explosion, precisely at its central weak point. The delayed reaction, impossible by conventional ballistics, silenced every voice on the observation deck. Ellie lowered her rifle calmly, her expression unchanged as she began disassembling and cleaning the weapon with methodical movements. The crowd stood frozen, defense experts frantically consulting their devices, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. "That's impossible," whispered the German minister, all amusement gone from his face. Ellie continued her cleaning routine, seemingly oblivious to the stunned silence she had created, and to the hungry eyes now fixed upon her with newfound interest. Pandemonium erupted across the demonstration grounds. Military officials in pressed uniforms rushed toward the firing line, their faces contorted with disbelief and urgent questions. Eleanor Varga simply stood there, unmoved by the commotion swirling around her, like autumn leaves in a windstorm. With methodical precision, she disassembled her vintage bolt-action rifle, each movement deliberate and practiced. "Ma'am, you need to explain what just happened," demanded a red-faced colonel, flanked by 2 security personnel. Ellie glanced up briefly, her weathered hands continuing their work. "I believe I completed the demonstration as requested," she replied, her voice carrying the same calm certainty as when she'd taken her position minutes earlier. The defense minister himself pushed through the crowd. "That explosion was 4 miles away. It's physically impossible with standard equipment." The silver-haired woman offered no justification, no technical explanation. She simply secured her rifle components in their worn leather case, the brass latches clicking shut with finality. the gathered officials grew increasingly agitated, their demands for answers intensifying as satellite communications confirmed the distant bunker's destruction. "You need to come with us for debriefing," the minister insisted, gesturing toward a nearby government building. Ellie nodded politely, shouldering her case. "Of course, just allow me to retrieve my coat." As the officials conferred about secure transport and immediate classification protocols, the ballistics physicist slipped between two arguing generals. With the practiced ease of someone accustomed to avoiding attention, she melded into the chaotic crowd of military personnel, contractors, and demonstration staff. By the time anyone realized she was gone, Ellie had already passed through 3 security checkpoints, her unremarkable appearance and confident stride raising no alarms. Back at the demonstration site, frantic searches yielded nothing. The woman who had shattered physical limitations had vanished without a trace, leaving only questions and disbelief in her wake. 7 hours later, in a secured analysis room, intelligence officers reviewed satellite footage frame by frame. The thermal imaging was conclusive and baffling. The shot had indeed originated from her position. No secondary devices, no hidden assistance, no modern technology beyond her ancient rifle. The trajectory analysis confirmed what witnesses had seen, a single bullet traveling an impossible distance with unprecedented accuracy. "This changes everything," whispered the lead analyst, removing his glasses to rub tired eyes. "If she can do this with outdated equipment—" His colleague nodded grimly. "Find her, whatever it takes." Across Eastern Europe, surveillance systems began scanning for Eleanor Varga's face, while in distant server rooms, classified files bearing her name were unsealed for the first time in decades. The impossible shot had done more than destroy a target. It had awakened ghosts many had worked hard to keep buried. The small cottage nestled in the foothills of the Carpathians had been Eleanor Varga's sanctuary for nearly 15 years. Its weathered stone walls and creaking wooden floors offered the anonymity she craved after walking away from her former life. Every morning, she followed the same routine, tending her modest garden, brewing strong coffee, and avoiding the curious glances of villagers who never quite accepted the silver-haired foreigner as one of their own. Today, however, the familiar rhythm felt disrupted. Ellie's hands trembled slightly as she placed her mug on the windowsill and gazed at the mist-shrouded mountains. The demonstration had been a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment that threatened everything she'd built here. She'd spent years cultivating this quiet existence, burying Dr. Eleanor Varga beneath the identity of a reclusive widow with no remarkable past. The physicist closed her eyes, unwillingly transported back to that cold December morning in '87 when everything changed. The calculations had been perfect, or so she thought. The trajectory models, the atmospheric compensation, the energy dispersion, all flawless on paper. But paper couldn't account for human error. 3 civilians dead because she hadn't considered the secondary blast radius. 3 families destroyed because of her arrogance. Ellie's smartphone buzzed, a rare intrusion in her analog life. The message was from an unlisted number. "Impressive comeback, Dr. Varga. The defense community is buzzing. 4 miles with a bolt action, the impossible made possible again." She deleted it immediately, her heart racing. They had found her already. Of course they had. The military establishment never truly let its assets disappear, especially those with her particular talents. Ellie moved to the kitchen and pulled out the false bottom of her bread box, retrieving a small notebook filled with equations and diagrams. The only record of her work she'd kept. Through the window, she noticed a black vehicle slowly passing her cottage for the second time that morning. The driver's face was obscured, but the deliberate pace told her everything she needed to know. Her peaceful exile was ending. That evening, as darkness settled over the village, Ellie sat by her fireplace, methodically cleaning her rifle. Not the vintage one from the demonstration, but its twin, kept hidden beneath floorboards all these years. Her fingers moved with muscle memory across the familiar metal. 15 years of silence, she whispered to the empty room. 15 years of atonement. But atonement, it seemed, was a luxury the world would no longer afford her. The whispers were growing louder. Her old world, with all its promises, dangers, and ghosts, was closing in fast, and Eleanor Varga knew better than most that some shots, once fired, could never be called back. The knock came at dusk, startling Eleanor Ellie Varga from her evening tea ritual. In her small mountain village, visitors were rare, and welcome ones even rarer. She peered through the window, her breath catching at the sight of a face she hadn't seen in nearly a decade. "Dr. Varga," the man said when she reluctantly opened the door. "I apologize for the intrusion." His voice was deeper than she remembered, his once youthful face now lined with worry. "Mikhail," Ellie replied, recognizing her former student despite the years. "I go by Eleanor now, just Eleanor." She didn't invite him in, but the biting mountain air eventually forced her hand. Inside her modest home, the weapons engineer paced nervously, refusing the tea she offered. "I wouldn't have come if it wasn't urgent," he explained, glancing repeatedly at the encrypted device in his hand. "The prototype, your prototype, it's gone." Ellie's fingers tightened around her mug. "I have no prototypes. I left that life behind." "The guidance system based on your atmospheric manipulation theory," Mikhail continued, undeterred. "Someone's taken it. Not just the hardware, but all the research data." The silver-haired woman set her cup down with deliberate calm. "Whatever was stolen belongs to your employers, not me. I signed away those rights years ago." "You know it's not that simple." The engineer leaned forward. "The algorithms were yours. The core principles, nobody else fully understands them, not even me." His voice dropped. "And whoever took it isn't interested in defense. They're looking at applications we never considered." Memories flashed through Ellie's mind, the explosion that had claimed innocent lives, the faces of those who had trusted her research would protect, not destroy. "I can't help you," she said firmly. "I swore an oath." "To do no harm?" Mikhail challenged. "What about the harm that will come if this technology is weaponized beyond anything we imagined?" Ellie stood, walking to the window. Outside, the mountains stood silent against the darkening sky, indifferent to human concerns. "I've seen what happens when my work falls into the wrong hands. Never again." "People will die, Eleanor." "People always die," she replied, her voice hollow. "The question is whether I'll be responsible." The engineer placed a small data drive on her table. "At least look at what they've done with your research. Then decide." After he left, Ellie stared at the drive for hours, her oath to never build or teach again, weighing against the growing certainty that her past had finally caught up with her. Whatever peace she had found in this remote village was about to end. She could feel it as surely as she could calculate a bullet's trajectory through changing winds. The news came in the morning, slipped beneath Ellie's door like a death notice. A glossy brochure advertising the International Precision Challenge. The euphemism almost made Eleanor Varga laugh. The competition promised record prize money, global television coverage, and cutting-edge ballistic assessment technology. She recognized the language immediately. Military recruitment dressed as sport entertainment. Ellie tossed the brochure onto her kitchen table, where morning light caught the embossed logo, a crosshair superimposed over a globe. Subtle. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," she muttered, pouring herself tea from a chipped pot. Her smartphone buzzed with 3 separate messages from former colleagues, all asking if she'd seen the announcement. The competition was generating buzz across Europe, with preliminary rounds scheduled in 5 countries. Defense contractors had lined up as sponsors, their logos tastefully arranged along the brochure's margins. Private security firms weapons manufacturers, and government agencies thinly disguised as technology partners filled out the list. Ellie might have ignored it entirely, if not for the paragraph on page 3 describing the revolutionary targeting assessment system that would evaluate contestants. The language was deliberately vague, but she recognized her own work beneath the marketing jargon. The predictive algorithms she'd developed decades ago, mathematical models that could anticipate a bullet's path through complex atmospheric conditions, had been incorporated into the competition's scoring system. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her cup. Those algorithms had never been published. They remained classified, buried in research she'd abandoned after the incident that drove her into seclusion. Through her kitchen window, Ellie watched villagers going about their morning routines, unaware of the shadow passing over her quiet life. The silver-haired woman picked up her encrypted device, a habit from her previous life she couldn't abandon, and began searching restricted databases she still had access to. What she found confirmed her fears. The competition wasn't merely using her algorithms, it was weaponizing them. By gathering data from hundreds of elite marksmen under controlled conditions, someone could perfect the predictive model beyond anything she'd ever imagined possible. The former physicist paced her small kitchen, mind racing. This wasn't coincidence. First the demonstration, then the stolen prototype. Now this public spectacle designed to harvest precision shooting data. Someone was systematically collecting the pieces of her research, assembling them into something she'd spent years ensuring would never exist. Ellie stared at the brochure again, at the list of preliminary competition sites. The final round would take place in northern Italy, less than 300 kilometers from where she now stood. Too close for comfort, too deliberate to ignore. She reached for her phone, hesitated, then dialed a number she'd memorized but never used. The old wooden barn creaked in protest as Eleanor Ellie Varga adjusted the scope on her vintage rifle. Dust particles danced in the slanting afternoon light that filtered through weathered planks. She had agreed to this arrangement against her better judgment, but something about Louisa's determination had worn down her resistance. "You're rushing again," Ellie said, her voice quiet but firm. "The target isn't going anywhere." Louisa lowered the weapon with a frustrated sigh. The young woman's fingers drummed impatiently against the stock, her posture betraying the internal battle between natural talent and forced restraint. "I had the shot," she insisted, the faint scent of citrus cologne rising from her collar as she turned. Ellie shook her head. "You had a guess. There's a difference between confidence and arrogance that could cost lives." The mentor moved closer, adjusting Louisa's stance with practiced hands. The young prodigy reminded her painfully of Anna, the same fiery eyes, the same stubborn tilt of the chin. Ellie had buried those memories alongside her sister years ago. Yet here they were, resurrected in this barn on the edge of her mountain refuge. "Breathe first, then calculate, then decide," Ellie instructed, tapping Louisa's temple. "The mathematics happen here, before they happen out there." The metallic click of the bolt action echoed through the barn as Louisa reloaded. Her raw talent was undeniable. Ellie had seen her hit targets that seasoned professionals would struggle with. But talent without discipline was merely potential, and potential alone had never saved anyone. "Why did you agree to train me?" Louisa asked suddenly, lowering the rifle. "You turned everyone else away." Ellie paused, considering her words carefully. The truth, that she saw a reflection of her own youthful mistakes in this impulsive prodigy, seemed too heavy for this moment. "Because you asked the right questions," she answered instead. Their sessions continued through the afternoon, the rhythm of instruction punctuated by the distant report of shots. With each hour, their dynamic shifted subtly. The young woman's eagerness began to temper with patience. The older woman's reservation softened with cautious approval. As dusk approached, Ellie watched Louisa disassemble the weapon with growing competence. The girl's hands moved with newfound respect for the instrument and what it represented. "Same time tomorrow?" Louisa asked, hope evident in her voice. Ellie nodded, surprising herself. This uneasy mentorship was not what she had planned for her quiet exile, but perhaps it was what both of them needed. The weight of her past felt momentarily lighter as she closed the barn door behind them, locking away both the weapons and the ghosts they had stirred for another day. The sleek black vehicle pulled up to Eleanor Varga's modest mountain home just after dusk. A tall man in an immaculate suit emerged, his movements precise and calculated. Ellie watched from her window, the weight of her rifle a comfort against her leg, as she recognized the telltale signs of a private military contractor. "Ms. Varga, my employers are quite impressed with your demonstration," the man said once she reluctantly invited him inside. His accent was difficult to place, deliberately so, she suspected. "They're prepared to make you wealthy beyond imagination." Ellie gestured toward her simple furnishings. "Does this look like the home of someone concerned with wealth?" The contractor smiled thinly, placing a tablet on her worn kitchen table. €5 million for exclusive rights to your atmospheric manipulation technique, plus guaranteed security and anonymity. He slid the device toward her. "All we need is the physics model behind your shot." "My shot was luck and experience," Ellie replied, not touching the tablet. "Nothing more." "We both know that's not true." His voice hardened. "The satellite footage confirms what our analysts suspected. You've perfected what the military considered theoretical." Ellie poured herself tea, deliberately taking her time. "And who exactly are your employers?" "Private interests, defense contractors with legitimate government partnerships." The silver-haired woman laughed without humor. "There's nothing legitimate about weaponizing my research beyond its intended parameters." The man's pleasant facade cracked slightly. "Your research? The intellectual property rights belong to the defense ministry that funded your work. You merely borrowed their investment when you disappeared." Ellie set down her cup with deliberate calm. "Is that a threat?" "An observation." He straightened his tie. "My employers prefer cooperation, but they'll pursue legal channels if necessary. Patents can be contested, especially those with national security implications." "And the darker measures?" Ellie asked, eyes narrowing. "The ones you haven't mentioned yet." The contractor's smile returned, colder than before. "There are organizations who would extract your knowledge through less compensatory means. My employers are offering protection from such entities. Protection from threats they themselves would orchestrate," Ellie said, standing. "I know this game. I helped write the rulebook." As she showed him to the door, he paused. "Consider carefully, Miss Varga. Your young protégé, Louisa, isn't it? Talented girl. It would be unfortunate if her career prospects were limited by association with you." Ellie's expression remained impassive, but her hand tightened on the doorframe. "Good night." After the vehicle disappeared down the mountain road, she methodically checked her security system, then reached for her encrypted device. The contractor's visit confirmed her fears. The demonstration had drawn exactly the wrong kind of attention. The headlines flashed across Ellie's smartphone screen with sickening familiarity. A guidance system malfunction in northern Italy had sent a peacekeeping missile veering off course, striking an abandoned warehouse instead of its intended target during a military exercise. No casualties, but the political fallout was immediate and severe. Eleanor Varga recognized the technology instantly. The guidance algorithm bore her unmistakable signature, a patent she'd filed 20 years ago, intended for precision targeting that would minimize civilian casualties. The retired physicist slumped into her worn armchair, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders like a physical burden. "They modified the core stabilization parameters," she whispered to the empty room. The Italian defense minister was already facing calls for resignation, while military officials scrambled to explain how a supposedly foolproof system had failed so spectacularly. Ellie's phone buzzed with a message from her former student. "Have you seen the news? Your algorithm wasn't meant for this application. They've bastardized your work." She didn't respond. What could she say? That she'd known this might happen? That this was precisely why she'd walked away from her research, disappeared into the mountains, and sworn never to share her knowledge again? The scandal dominated European news cycles. Experts dissected the technical specifications of the missile system, unwittingly describing innovations Ellie had developed decades earlier. One commentator referred to the algorithm as revolutionary but fundamentally flawed, words that cut deeper than any critic could know. By evening, 3 separate journalists had tracked down her email address. Their messages sat unanswered as Ellie paced her small cottage, the familiar doubt gnawing at her conscience. Her brother had warned her years ago that silence wasn't neutrality, it was complicity of another kind. Perhaps he was right, she murmured, watching the sunset paint the mountain peaks in shades of orange and pink. The beauty contrasted sharply with the turmoil in her mind. The UN investigator, the man who had once known her better than anyone, would surely be assigned to this case. He would recognize her work immediately. How long before he appeared at her door, asking the question she'd been asking herself for years? Ellie pulled her old notebooks from beneath a floorboard, dust coating her fingers as she flipped through pages of calculations and diagrams. The answers were here, explanations that could exonerate the Italian officials and reveal the true nature of the modifications. But breaking her silence meant stepping back into a world she'd rejected, acknowledging that her self-imposed exile had failed to contain the danger of her creations. The choice tormented her: continue in principled silence while others paid for her innovations, or speak and risk everything she'd built in her quiet second life. The morning of the competition dawned crisp and clear. Louisa adjusted her scope with steady hands, ignoring the whispers that followed her across the firing range. As the youngest competitor, she'd already drawn attention, but it was her consistent accuracy that kept all eyes on her. "Contestant 17, you're up," called the range master, his voice carrying across the field. She stepped forward, feeling the weight of Ellie Vargas' training in every movement. The young woman had memorized her mentor's lessons: breathe, calculate, adjust, squeeze. The rifle felt like an extension of herself now. When she fired, the target 400 yards away shattered precisely where she'd aimed. "Impressive," murmured one of the judges, making notes on his tablet. "Move to the next station." By midday, Louisa had cleared 3 rounds with near-perfect scores, outperforming military veterans twice her age. During the lunch break, she noticed technicians reviewing footage of each contestant's performance, feeding data into sleek computers. "They're not just scoring us," whispered a competitor from Germany who'd befriended her. "They're analyzing our shooting patterns." He nodded toward the judge's tent. "I've seen that software before in military recruitment." Curious, Louisa wandered closer to the tent during a scheduled break. Through the canvas flap, she glimpsed screens displaying what looked like trajectory predictions, algorithms mapping each shooter's tendencies, strengths, and weaknesses. The interface looked eerily familiar from Ellie's old research papers. "These candidates show promising adaptability," she overheard, "especially 17. Her unpredictability factor is off the charts." "Perfect for the specialized assignments," replied another voice. "The client will be pleased." A chill ran down her spine. This wasn't just a competition, it was an audition. That evening in her hotel room, Louisa researched the competition's sponsors. Behind the legitimate sporting organizations and arms manufacturers lay a web of shell companies connected to private military contractors. The young woman realized with growing unease that her success was painting a target on her back, not as a champion, but as a potential asset. When the next day's challenge required eliminating moving targets from concealed positions, Louisa understood the real-world applications being tested. The judges weren't looking for sport shooters. They wanted killers who could operate in any condition. As she advanced to the semi-finals, Louisa received a congratulatory message on her phone. Your skills have been noticed. The real opportunities await after the trophy ceremony. She deleted it immediately, her finger trembling slightly. Ellie had warned her about this world, but experiencing it firsthand made the danger palpable. The competition wasn't the end. It was merely the beginning of something far more sinister. The explosion rocked the outskirts of a small Eastern European town, 4 miles from where a sniper's nest was later discovered. Military intelligence wasted no time making connections. By nightfall, Eleanor Ellie Varga found her mountain sanctuary breached by stern-faced officials with satellite images and accusatory questions. "This signature is unmistakable," said a man in an immaculate suit, sliding photographs across her kitchen table. "The trajectory calculations, the delayed detonation. It's your technique, Miss Varga." Ellie studied the images with practiced calm, though her stomach twisted. The shot pattern was indeed similar to hers, too similar. Someone had replicated her method with frightening accuracy. "I haven't left this village in 3 weeks," she replied, pushing the photos back. The silver-haired woman maintained her composure, but her mind raced. Who could have mimicked her work so precisely? By morning, her cellular device buzzed constantly with messages from international agencies. News outlets ran speculation pieces linking her to foreign intelligence operations. The peaceful isolation she'd cultivated for years crumbled around her. A formal letter arrived by courier the next day. The European Defense Consortium claimed that her ballistics research, conducted decades ago under their funding, remained their intellectual property. They demanded immediate cooperation or threatened legal consequences that would strip her of everything, including her freedom. "They can't own the physics of a bullet's path," Ellie muttered to herself, pacing her modest living room. But the military establishment had deep pockets in longer memories than she'd anticipated. Her former student called, voice tight with anxiety. "They're searching my laboratory, Ellie. They think I helped you develop new applications of your old research." The retired physicist stared out at the mountains that had sheltered her. Someone was systematically destroying her carefully constructed anonymity, using her own science against her. When the UN investigator arrived unannounced at her door, Ellie almost refused to see him. Their past complicated matters, but his presence suggested the situation had escalated beyond national borders. "I need to know if you're involved," he said, his professional tone barely masking their shared history. "Because if you're not, someone is going to extraordinary lengths to make it appear so." Ellie invited him in, against her better judgment. "They're framing me to force me out of hiding," she explained, pouring 2 cups of tea. "The question isn't who's doing it, it's why now." The investigator nodded slowly. "The sniper challenge begins its final rounds tomorrow. And Louisa is competing," Ellie whispered, the pieces suddenly falling into place. Her protégé was excelling, drawing attention, and someone wanted to ensure Ellie couldn't protect her when the true nature of the competition revealed itself. Outside, a surveillance drone hovered just beyond her property line. The net was tightening. The encrypted message arrived at 3 in the morning, jolting Eleanor Ellie Varga from fitful sleep. Her weathered hands trembled as she activated the device, expecting another threat. Instead, the holographic display flickered to life with a face she had mourned for over a decade. "If you're seeing this, Ellie, I'm either truly dead or wish to appear so," her mentor spoke, the familiar voice sending chills down her spine. The wrinkled face looked older than she remembered, but those piercing eyes remained unchanged, calculating, brilliant, and utterly ruthless when necessary. "The Deadshot protocol was never decommissioned," he continued. "They merely buried it deeper, waiting for the right moment to resurrect it. That moment has come, and your demonstration has accelerated their timeline." Ellie sank into her chair, the mountain silence outside her window suddenly oppressive. The mentor she had trusted, the man who had shaped her understanding of ballistics and ethics alike, had prepared this message knowing exactly what would unfold. Your name is on the active list now, not as an asset, but as a target. His expression softened momentarily. I taught you too well, it seems. Your atmospheric manipulation technique was always the missing piece. She paced across the worn floorboards, mind racing. The Deadshot Protocol had been her mentor's brainchild, a system integrating predictive algorithms with precision weaponry that could eliminate targets with near-perfect certainty. She had helped design it, believing it would remain theoretical. The Sniper Challenge is their recruitment tool, he explained. The stolen prototypes, the scandals, all orchestrated to flush you out while they gather the necessary talent to operationalize your research. The pieces clicked into place. The contractor's visit, the demonstration mockery, Luisa's unexpected talent, all carefully arranged moves in a game she hadn't realized she was playing. They're weaponizing your work on a global scale, Ellie. What you accomplished with a single rifle, they plan to implement with network systems across continents. The old physicist closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down. Her technology, her life's work, perverted into exactly what she had sworn to prevent. The message ended with a set of coordinates and a timestamp. If you still believe in what we once stood for, you'll know what to do. The screen went dark, leaving Ellie alone with the terrible knowledge that her mentor had foreseen everything, perhaps even orchestrated it. The man who had taught her to calculate wind resistance and trajectory had calculated her own movements with equal precision. Dawn broke over the mountains as she made her decision. If the Deadshot Protocol was active again, she would need more than just Luisa's raw talent. She would need to become the weapon she had spent decades trying to forget. The knock came at dusk. Ellie Varga hesitated before opening the door, her hand instinctively reaching for the rifle she kept hidden behind the coat rack. Standing on her threshold was a face she hadn't seen in nearly 8 years. Her brother, his once youthful features now weathered by political battles and personal demons. "Hello, Ellie," he said, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of his former career. "May I come in?" She stepped aside wordlessly. The former politician moved through her modest home with the cautious air of a diplomat in hostile territory, taking in the sparse furnishings and tactical sightlines that betrayed her perpetual vigilance. "The Parliamentary Committee is asking questions," he began, settling into a worn armchair. "About your demonstration, about your past work." Ellie poured 2 glasses of the local plum brandy. "And suddenly you remember you have a sister?" "I never forgot," he countered, accepting the drink. "You're the one who disappeared after Bucharest." The mention of that city hung between them like smoke. It was there, 23 years ago, that their paths had irrevocably split. He toward politics and public service, she toward the shadows of ballistics research that would eventually haunt them both. "I made my choice," Ellie said, her silver hair catching the lamplight. "Just as you made yours when you denied knowing about the program." Her brother leaned forward. "I protected our family name. What would you have had me do? Tell the truth? That my sister designed a targeting system that killed 19 civilians?" "It was 17, she corrected reflexively, the number seared into her conscience. "And the system was altered without my knowledge." "The public doesn't care about technical distinctions," he snapped. "Now you've resurfaced with this impossible shot, and reporters are connecting dots." "My position?" "Your position," Ellie interrupted, "was always more important than the truth." They fell into a tense silence, the weight of shared blood and divergent loyalties filling the room. Outside, wind rustled through the mountain pines, a sound that had become Ellie's only constant companion. "I need to know what you're planning," he finally said, "for both our sakes." Ellie studied her brother's face, searching for traces of the boy who had once defended her against neighborhood bullies. "I'm trying to stop something worse than Bucharest," she admitted. "Something that could make the Deadshot Protocol look like a child's toy." Her brother's expression hardened. "Then God help us both," he whispered, draining his glass. "Because the committee isn't just asking questions anymore. They're issuing warrants." The knock at the door was firm, authoritative. Eleanor Ellie. Varga peered through the window of her mountain home to see a familiar silhouette, one she hadn't encountered in nearly 15 years. UN Special Investigator Harmon, he announced formally when she opened the door, though his eyes softened momentarily. I believe we have some matters to discuss, Miss Varga. Ellie gestured him inside without a word. The investigator removed his coat, revealing the same broad shoulders she remembered, now carrying the weight of international diplomacy rather than youthful ambition. So they sent you, she finally said, setting 2 cups of tea on the worn kitchen table. Interesting choice. Not their choice. Mine. He pulled out a digital device, placing it between them. The missile system in northern Italy. The demonstration in the Carpathians. 2 impossible shots with the same signature. Your signature, Ellie. She watched him carefully. The years had etched lines around his eyes, but his gaze remained sharp. Analytical, the same qualities that had drawn her to him during their brief, intense relationship at the research facility. You know, I walked away from all that, she replied. Why would I resurface now? That's what I can't figure out. The investigator swiped through evidence files. Satellite footage confirms your presence at the demonstration. The Italian guidance system bears unmistakable markers of your atmospheric manipulation technique. Yet nothing about this fits your profile. Ellie remained silent, watching his methodical assessment. This was the man who had once understood her better than anyone, before her research took that fatal turn. Someone's framing you, he said finally, lowering his voice, and doing a damn good job of it. What makes you so sure? Because I know you. His hand moved toward hers, but stopped short. The woman I knew would never weaponize her research after what happened in Bucharest. The mention of Bucharest hung between them like smoke. Ellie's fingers tightened around her cup. The evidence suggests otherwise, she challenged. The evidence is too perfect. The investigator leaned forward. Someone wants you implicated. The question is why now, after all these years? As daylight faded outside, they pieced together connections, the stolen prototype, the sniper challenge, the mounting legal threats. With each revelation, the investigator's official demeanor softened, replaced by the ally she once knew. I can buy you time, he offered, standing to leave. Redirect the investigation, question the satellite data. At the doorway, his professional facade cracked completely. Be careful, Ellie. Whoever's behind this knows exactly what buttons to push. She nodded, watching him walk to his vehicle. The tightening net around her had momentarily slackened, but Ellie knew the reprieve was temporary. The real question remained, could she trust him completely, or was his reappearance just another calculated move in this dangerous game? The manila folder trembled in Louisa's hands as she stared at the faded photograph. Her mother's face, not the woman who had raised her, but a stranger with her own eyes, smiled back from a group photo of scientists. Third from the left stood a younger Eleanor Varga, arm casually draped around the shoulder of Luisa's biological mother. You knew, Luisa whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle patter of rain against the barn's metal roof. All this time, you knew who I was. Ellie remained silent, her weathered hands resting on the wooden workbench. The old rifle between them seemed to divide their worlds. Katerina was brilliant, the older woman finally said. The atmospheric calculations we developed together became the foundation of everything I accomplished later. She disappeared during the final testing phase of Deadshot. I always suspected it wasn't voluntary. Louisa traced her mother's face with her fingertip. Why didn't you tell me when I first came to you? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was manipulating you? Ellie's eyes remained fixed on the disassembled firing pin before her. I wanted you to make your own choices. The young prodigy slammed the folder shut. Like the choice you made for Dmitry Kovacs? Ellie's hands froze mid-motion. The name hung between them like a specter. The records say he was your spotter, that you let him walk into an ambush to complete your mission objective. Louisa's voice hardened. They called it acceptable collateral in the report. "There's more to that story than what's in those files," Ellie replied, her calm demeanor finally cracking. "Dmitri was more than my spotter. He was Katerina's husband. Your father." The revelation hit Louisa like physical force. She stumbled backward, knocking a case of ammunition to the floor. Brass casings scattered across the wooden planks like fallen stars. "You let my father die?" The words came out hollow, disbelieving. "I tried to save him," Ellie whispered. "The mission parameters changed. Someone betrayed us from inside. The same people who took your mother months earlier." The older woman finally looked up, her eyes reflecting decades of guilt. "Dmitri knew the risks. He made me promise to finish what we started, to make sure the technology couldn't be weaponized. I failed him. I failed your mother. And I've been trying to make it right ever since." Louisa's perception of her mentor fractured and reformed in an instant. The legendary sniper, the brilliant physicist, the reclusive teacher, all masks covering a woman haunted by impossible choices. "Is that why you took me on? Guilt?" Louisa asked, her voice barely steady. "At first," Ellie admitted. "But then I saw who you are. Not just their daughter, but something entirely your own. Something better than all of us." Eleanor Ellie Varga stared at the encrypted files on her device, her fingers trembling slightly as the pieces fell into place. The satellite images confirmed what she had feared. The Sniper Challenge's financial backers were the same military consortium that had tried to bury her research decades ago. The same group that had threatened legal action when she refused to continue the Deadshot protocol. "They never gave up," she whispered to herself, the glow of the screen illuminating her silver hair in the dimness of her modest village home. The contractor who had approached her weeks ago with that smooth proposal wasn't just any arms dealer. His digital footprint, which the UN investigator had helped her trace, led directly back to the consortium. He was their operative, tasked with either bringing her into their fold or neutralizing her as a threat. Ellie poured herself a small glass of local brandy, her mind racing. The timing was too perfect. Her demonstration at the Carpathians, the immediate offer, Louisa's rapid rise in the competition. They had orchestrated everything from the beginning. A message from her former student appeared on her device. "Found something. Call immediately." When Ellie connected the call, the weapons engineer's face appeared, haggard with lack of sleep. "I've been reviewing footage from your demonstration. Those skeptics in the audience, the ones who laughed at you, they weren't random attendees." "What do you mean?" Ellie asked, though she already suspected the answer. Facial recognition matched 3 of them to private military contractors. "They were plants, Ellie. They were there to provoke you." The realization hit her like a physical blow. They had manipulated her pride, knowing exactly how to draw her out of hiding. The snickers, the dismissive glances, all calculated to make her prove herself after years of anonymity. "They needed you to demonstrate the shot publicly," her former student continued. "They needed proof that your method still worked before launching the challenge." Ellie closed her eyes, remembering the satisfaction she'd felt when the distant target had exploded. How easily they had played her. "There's more," the engineer added. "The consortium has a new director, someone who knows your work intimately." A chill ran through Ellie's body. There was only one person who understood her ballistics research well enough to resurrect it so completely. "It can't be," she whispered. "I don't have a name yet. But whoever it is has been planning this for years." Ellie ended the call and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains that had sheltered her for so long. Her sanctuary was now compromised, her past circling back like a bullet finding its target. She needed to warn Louisa. The young woman wasn't just competing in a challenge. She was being evaluated for recruitment into something far darker than she could imagine. The truth was finally revealed in a dimly lit basement lab, where Eleanor Varga stood beside her disassembled rifle. The UN investigator watched intently as her weathered hands traced the internal mechanisms with practiced precision. "It's not magic," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "The rifle has internal dampening systems I designed during the Cold War, technology that absorbs recoil patterns most ballistics experts don't even account for." Ellie pointed to the custom-machined barrel with its zero-drift tuning. But these modifications, impressive as they were, only told half the story. The true secret lay in what she called atmospheric manipulation, a technique she had pioneered decades ago and buried in classified research. "The bullet doesn't just fly through air," she continued, her silver hair catching the harsh fluorescent light. "It rides it. Each round contains microscopic veins that interact with wind currents, allowing for minor trajectory adjustments mid-flight." The investigator leaned closer, their old intimacy momentarily rekindled by shared fascination. "You're saying the bullet steers itself?" "Not autonomously," Ellie clarified. "It follows atmospheric pathways I calculate before firing. The mathematics are complex." Her understatement hung in the air between them. What had begun as theoretical research during her youth had evolved into something far more dangerous in others' hands. The prototype she'd abandoned after witnessing its devastating potential had been resurrected, refined, and weaponized beyond her original design. "The contractor wasn't just after your knowledge," the investigator said, connecting the dots. "They wanted confirmation that the technology could be scaled." Ellie nodded grimly. "What I demonstrated with a single round, they want to deploy in missile systems. Guided munitions that can change course multiple times, rendering traditional defense systems useless." Documents spread across the table revealed the extent of the exploitation. Her former student's stolen prototype had been just the beginning. The Sniper Challenge was collecting data on human performance to complement the algorithmic approach, creating a hybrid system that combined human intuition with mechanical precision. "You've become both the key and the lock," he said quietly. "The only person who fully understands the science is also the greatest threat to its deployment." Ellie's shoulders slumped slightly under the weight of this revelation. The very research she had abandoned to prevent bloodshed was now at the center of an international arms race. Her demonstration in the Carpathians hadn't just impressed officials, it had confirmed to powerful interests that her theoretical work could be practically applied. "I never wanted this," she whispered, closing the rifle case with a decisive click. "But I'm the only one who knows how to stop it." The manila envelope slid across Ellie Varga's weathered kitchen table, its contents spilling out like ghosts from her past. Photographs, coordinates, and a single handwritten note in a script she would recognize anywhere. Her hands trembled as she traced the familiar loops and angles, handwriting that belonged to a dead man. "Impossible," she whispered, but the evidence was undeniable. Dr. Alexei Koval, her mentor, her guiding light, the man whose funeral she had attended 15 years ago, was alive. The surveillance photos showed him entering a private facility in Geneva 3 days earlier. His face was thinner, hair completely white now, but the calculating eyes remained unchanged. Those same eyes that had once guided her through complex ballistic equations were now orchestrating the International Sniper Challenge. Ellie collapsed into her chair, memories washing over her. Alexei had been the one who recognized her talent, who pushed her to merge physics with marksmanship. He had been like a father to her when her own family fractured. And now, this betrayal cut deeper than any bullet. The UN investigator placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Ellie. We confirmed it through 3 separate channels." She shrugged away his touch. "Why? What could possibly be worth this deception?" The answer lay in the final document, a privatization contract. Alexei had spent 15 years building a shadow corporation to acquire and commercialize the Deadshot protocol. The Sniper Challenge was merely a recruitment tool, identifying the next generation of operators who could implement the system globally. "He's selling it to the highest bidder," Ellie muttered, disgust rising in her throat. Everything we swore to protect. The investigator nodded grimly. There's more. We intercepted communications about the final stage of the challenge. When he explained, the blood drained from Ellie's face. The ultimate test for the finalists would be a 6-mile shot at a moving target, her. Alexei had designed the perfect demonstration. Eliminate the one person who could expose the flaws in his system. Louisa, Ellie gasped, suddenly understanding why her protégé had been fast-tracked through the competition. The girl was being groomed not just as an operator, but as Ellie's executioner. She gathered the documents with trembling fingers. The barn where she had trained Louisa now felt like a betrayal itself. Every lesson, every shared secret. Had she unknowingly prepared the young woman to take her own life? Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. Ellie loaded her vintage rifle, the weight familiar in her hands. Her mentor had taught her everything about precision and patience, but he'd forgotten one crucial lesson. Never underestimate a student who has surpassed the teacher. The summer sun beat down on the open field as Eleanor, Ellie Varga, and Louisa took their positions. Cameras from every major network captured their movements, broadcasting the final stage of the sniper challenge to millions worldwide. The young prodigy's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her scope, while her mentor remained eerily calm, silver hair gleaming in the harsh light. "They're expecting us to compete against each other," Ellie whispered, her weathered fingers making minute adjustments to her vintage rifle. "That's exactly why we'll win." The predictive AI system hummed in the background, its algorithms scanning every variable: wind speed, barometric pressure, humidity, all based on Ellie's own research from decades ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. The very technology she'd created to prevent casualties was now being weaponized by her former mentor. "I'll feed false trajectory data into the system," she explained to Louisa. "You'll need to compensate exactly 12 degrees west when they least expect it." The young woman nodded, her earlier impulsiveness replaced by focused determination. The relationship between them had evolved beyond mere training. They now shared a bond forged through revelation and shared purpose. Through her earpiece, Ellie could hear the commentators speculating about the impossible shot that had started it all. Little did they know that the same principles that had made that shot possible would now dismantle the entire operation. 30 seconds, came the announcement over the loudspeaker. Ellie glanced at the UN investigator positioned discreetly among the officials. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement of what was about to unfold. He had risked everything to help her reach this moment. "Remember," Ellie said to her protégé, "it's not about hitting the target. It's about exposing the system." As the countdown reached 0, both women fired simultaneously. Their shots appeared to miss wildly, causing confused murmurs among the spectators. But instead of failure, their carefully calculated trajectories intersected with the hidden relay stations controlling the AI network. On the massive screens overlooking the field, lines of code began to appear. The Deadshot Protocol exposed for all to see. Government contracts, assassination targets, political manipulations, all laid bare in real time. "It's working," Louisa whispered, her eyes wide as chaos erupted among the officials. Ellie remained focused, making one final adjustment to her weapon. Now for the master server. With decades of precision behind her final shot, the ballistics physicist targeted the heart of the system. The bullet curved impossibly through the air, following the atmospheric manipulation technique that had made her both famous and infamous. 3 miles away, the central hub of the Deadshot Protocol erupted in flames. "That," Ellie said quietly as she lowered her rifle, "is truly impossible." The camera lights flashed relentlessly as Eleanor Vargas stepped up to the podium. Her silver hair caught the harsh glare, creating a halo effect that belied the gravity of the moment. The international press corps leaned forward, recorders extended, hungry for the confession they had been promised. I take full responsibility for the detonation at the Eastern European Defense Summit, she announced, her voice steady despite the lie. My research was never meant for this application. Behind the scenes, Luisa was executing the final stage of their plan. The young woman moved through the server facility with practiced stealth, placing the specialized charges exactly as they had rehearsed. She had 20 minutes before security protocols would reset. The technology you've witnessed was developed during my time as a ballistics physicist, Ellie continued, deliberately drawing out her statements to give her protégé more time. Its applications were meant to be theoretical, not weaponized. Questions erupted from the crowd. The UN investigator stood at the back of the room, their eyes meeting briefly. He understood what she was doing, sacrificing herself to protect both Luisa and the truth. Their unspoken connection had always been their strength. "Miss Varga, are you admitting to international terrorism?" shouted one reporter. "I'm admitting to a failure of ethical oversight," she replied. Each carefully crafted answer bought precious seconds for the destruction of the core servers housing the Deadshot protocol. Her brother watched the broadcast from his office, his face ashen. Despite their differences, he recognized the sacrifice his sister was making. He reached for his phone, already calculating how to mitigate the family fallout. In the server room, Luisa's device blinked green. "It's done," she whispered into her encrypted communication device. The mentor's legacy, the predictive algorithms that could turn any marksman into a weapon of mass destruction, was being systematically erased from existence. Back at the press conference, Ellie felt the vibration in her pocket. Relief washed over her, though her expression remained stoic. "I will cooperate fully with authorities," she announced, knowing that her reputation was the price for humanity's safety. As security personnel approached to escort her away, she caught a final glimpse of the UN investigator. The look they exchanged held decades of complicated history and a singular moment of perfect understanding. The world would remember Eleanor Varga as a dangerous rogue scientist. Headlines would condemn her, security agencies would disavow her, and history books would misunderstand her. But the Deadshot protocol would never again threaten innocent lives. As they led her away, Ellie felt lighter than she had in years. The burden of her past mistakes finally lifted, replaced by the certainty that she had at last done the right thing. The Alpine Valley stretched before them, a canvas of emerald and gold, bathed in the warm glow of sunset. Eleanor Varga leaned against the ancient stone wall, weathered like herself, both having witnessed more than their share of history. The crisp mountain air carried the scent of pine and distant rain, a cleansing breath after months of tension and danger. "It's over," Ellie said, her silver hair catching the fading light. She ran her fingers along the polished wood stock of her custom rifle, tracing the small notches that marked not kills, but moments of clarity throughout her tumultuous career. Luisa stood beside her, shoulders straighter than when they'd first met, eyes sharper but somehow gentler too. The young woman had shed her impulsiveness like an old coat, replacing it with something more valuable: discernment. "What happens now?" Luisa asked, watching a hawk circle lazily above the valley. Ellie lifted the rifle from its case. The weapon that had changed nations, started wars, and finally perhaps ended one. "This was never about the shot," she said. "It was about knowing when not to take it." She extended the rifle toward her protégé, not as a handoff of deadly skill, but as an offering of responsibility. The metal gleamed dully in the fading light, a relic of a bygone era. Luisa did not reach for it. Instead, she simply nodded, understanding blooming in her eyes. "Some legacies shouldn't continue," she said quietly. "And some should," Ellie countered, returning the weapon to its case. "Just not in the way we first imagined." They stood in companionable silence, mentor and student, two women separated by generations, but united by shared burden. The weight of the Deadshot protocol no longer hung between them. Its servers destroyed, its algorithms scrambled beyond recovery. "Your father would be proud," Ellie said finally. "He always believed knowledge should protect, not threaten." Luisa's eyes glistened. And your mentor was wrong. Precision without compassion is just another form of violence. Ellie felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of guilt and regret that had tightened with each passing year. The UN investigator had promised to clear her name eventually, though her reputation might never fully recover. Her brother had reached out, suggesting a holiday together, a small bridge across decades of silence. "What will you do?" Ellie asked, watching Luisa's profile against the darkening sky. "Teach," Luisa replied simply. "Not how to shoot, but how to think, how to question." Ellie smiled, genuine and unguarded for the first time in years. She closed the rifle case with a soft click of finality. The legacy she passed to Luisa wasn't in the weapon or even in the science. It was in the wisdom to know the difference between what one could do and what one should. As darkness settled over the valley, they turned away from the stone wall, leaving behind not shadows, but light.